Heyo, this is Shane with Shavy Photos, and basically what we're going to be doing today is a really quick speed edit of a full edit that I've done here. So basically we're going to start by reconstructing the image and extending it to make it appear as if the background is bigger or the space was bigger. So we're going to start by removing this object here, and then we're going to extend the background. And I've already done this in this image, so I'm going to switch over to a duplicate copy where I reverted it to the beginning and show you how I basically got to this point. So the first thing we want to do is create a copy. I'm just going to rasterize this just because I don't need it to be a smart object. And then we're going to select this object that's in frame, which is a part of the set that we don't really want to be there. And this is the struggles of working in a small space, but it doesn't have to be an end all with an edit like this. So we're just going to basically make a really quick rough selection right around the object. It doesn't have to be too precise. And then once that's selected, we are going to go into File, Content Aware Fill, and basically we're going to tell Photoshop to remove portions of this image that we don't want to be calculated. And then Photoshop's going to do its best to calculate the image and fill in the selected areas. And as we can see over to the right in the preview panel, it does a pretty good job, and I'm okay with that. So we're just going to go ahead and output that to a new layer and click OK. And we can see that Photoshop's done a fairly decent job. Now, there are some portions at the bottom that just didn't come through. It's a machines. Machines aren't always perfect. So we're just going to basically make a selection from the original copied layer, which is the second layer here, the middle layer, of an area that I think is going to work. We're going to Command J to copy that, move that up to the top of the layer stack. And then with our move tool, we're just going to move that over, and then we're going to press Command T to transform, or Control T if you're on Windows, which I am. I don't know why I said Command. But anyway, yeah, we're just going to transform that and basically just move it around and try to get this in a perspective where it looks as natural as possible. We're just going to do that by turning it, holding Command, moving the pixels around. Yeah, I'm going to right click in here, and we are going to use the warp function within the transform to just further bend these pixels and try our best to get them where we think they should be in relation to the proper perspective of the floor. And as you can see here, it's not at all perfect, but we do have more work to do. But for now, on the same layer with current and below selected, I am going to use the clone stamp and basically just continue to reconstruct the floor. So you're going to be sampling from an area, try to line that up as best as possible, and then you can just follow the lines to basically continue with the floor reconstruct. And now I'm just going to go around the edges of this image, and this is really important because when we extend the image, we basically want all of those pixels on the edge to be filled in with what we want to tell Photoshop to sample from. So we're just going to fill in the edges here. And now we're basically just going to merge all of that down into this one single layer here, and then we want to make sure that we're deleting the crop pixels, because when we pull out, we're going to see all of those areas that we retouched are still there. So once we delete those and then pull out again, it's going to give us a clean edge, which is what we want when we go in to reconstruct the extension of the image. So now extending the image and then clicking content aware. Photoshop's going to do its best to fill in. And now I'm back at the original image, because this is basically where I started the video. And on the very top on this retouch layer, we just created a blank layer that we're going to be using a combination of the spot healing and the clone tool to basically go through this image and try to take care of the spots that Photoshop just didn't computate well. These soft areas here that we're all going to try to just basically get some texture in to make it not look so weird. So with a spot healing brush, I'm just going to sample an area and go through here and basically just try to fix all of these soft spots as best as I can. Now, it's not going to be perfect, and that's okay, because in the end image, I'm going to end up blurring the background anyway, so it's going to all kind of blend together for the final image. But you still want to, at this point, go in and try to correct that as best as you can towards the start of the image. And I'm just doing a sped up version here just for time's sakes. And now I'm just further reconstructing the floor, and you can see that it's really going over and not really looking that good right now. But what we're going to do, that's actually intentional, because what we're going to do is we're going to create a layer mask for that layer. And basically what this does is it's going to hide areas that we don't want visible. And we're going to do that by painting black on a white layer mask. Black conceals, white reveals. So we're basically going to conceal that up to a point where it starts to look natural. And once we have that where we think it should be, we're going to go ahead and apply that layer mask. And then we're just going to merge all of these down to one retouch layer just to save space on the disk, because we honestly just don't need all of those layers. I mean, when you're doing reconstructions like this, it's going to be a quite destructive process anyhow. So that's okay. We still have our initial image at the very bottom of the layer in case this goes horribly wrong and we need to start over. But right now on that retouch layer, I'm just going through again with the spot healing brush and just basically finding other spots. This time we're going to zoom way in and try to correct some of the spots on the skin. Not too much. Basically, we're going for any acne spots that we may see and basically try to fill in that area as much as possible. We're going to do some more skin work later. Now we're just going through the floor doing the same thing, basically going all over the image and just retouching to remove spots, get rid of distractors that doesn't really necessarily play a role in the final image. And that's the before and the after. So now what we're going to do is we're going to be applying a frequency separation layer, and basically what this does is it separates the textures which are in a high frequency from the colors and tones which are in what's called a low frequency. And I use an action that I've created here from basically looking at a bunch of different tutorials and coming up with my own final solution. We're going to go ahead and set the radius of this median to 8, and basically what this is doing is it's removing all of the texture from the image, and you basically want to just slide this to a point where there's no more texture that you're seeing in your image, where it just becomes about the color. And once you get there and press OK, for this image, I think that 7 is a good number for me. Once you get there, press OK. Photoshop's going to basically compute everything and separate the textures, which will have some color left in it, but not much. And it's going to separate that from the textures from the colors, and you can work on them separately. Once they're added back together, you basically get the original image. And there's a lot of cool things that you can do with this. Now, whenever you're working on these, you want to make sure that your sample area is set to current layer only. Otherwise, you're going to get some crazy stuff happening. So if you're doing this, working on the stamp tool on the high layer, you get some weird stuff, just make sure that you look up and see that sample current layer is selected. So here we're just speed editing through the skin, just going through different textures, trying to put textures in certain places, remove them from certain places. And we're going to also do the same thing with the floor. Frequency separation is often related to skin work, but you can honestly use it in just about all of your photos. Like, once you get the hang of it, you really have an infinite range of things you can do with this. So what I've done is I've actually created an additional high layer that I'm going to apply a contrast shift to. I'm going to just up the contrast until I see that some of this texture is coming back. And basically now what I'm doing is I'm selecting the subject, and this is because, like, I don't want to affect anything other than the subject. And now what I'm doing is I've just gone to the emboss under the filters, and I'm basically what I'm working on is I'm playing with the texture that's already in the image and trying to shift that around to recreate a skin texture. And with this technique, what you want to do is you want to make sure that your height is set really low. Usually I find that 2 pixels is always good enough, and your amount is going to be fairly high. And then you just basically move this dial here to match your light, or the direction of your light. Now, I know this looks really weird right now, but basically what we're going to do is we're going to apply another layer mask to this area. And we're going to shift that to black so it hides everything. And then we're just going to use a white brush to paint that back into the areas where we only want it to affect the skin. And then it gets a little bit weird sometimes around edges. So if you find something weird happening, just go ahead and switch your brush back to black, repaint over that area, and it'll hide it again. And now with a black brush, I'm just basically dotting around the image to remove just little portions to just kind of give it more of a realistic skin texture type quality. And we're still not done with this layer yet, so it's going to look a little different once we're completely done with this. I'm just going to also do the same thing for other portions of the skin just to kind of help it blend better. And once again, making sure we stay away from those edges. And now I'm just going to lower the opacity of the effect and then just gradually raise it until I get to a point where it starts to look even more natural and doesn't really look too plastic-like. So once I've done that, I'm just going to go ahead and merge that down to the layer below it. And then I'm going to start taking a selection, a feathered selection. I use about 5 pixels, and we're just going to apply a contrast shift to that. And you can see what that's basically doing to the pixels. It's only affecting this textured layer. So what I want to do is basically, you can lower the contrast and get really smooth images, or you can raise the contrast to get more of a texture. I tend to like a little bit more texture, the textured look. So yeah, I'm just going to do a subtle shift of that to 11, and we're basically just going to go all around the face and select areas where we want to just bump up the texture a little bit. And side note, this can also be an interesting way to apply selective sharpening in areas, because you're just going to be sharpening the textures and you're not going to affect any of the color underneath it, because the color and tones are all on a separate layer. So quick before and after of that. And now what I'm going to do is with my colors layer. Now what I'm going to do with the color layer selected, I'm creating a black and white adjustment layer that I'm going to use just to kind of map out tones and see where the tones need to be blended a little bit. And on my color layer, I'm just going to make a selection of the area that I want smoothed, and I'm going to go to noise, median, and then basically I'm just going to find a nice range within the median where I think this is doing a proper blend, and then I'm going to cut that in half. So I'm going to go to 6, and the reason why I do this is because I have a hotkey set to basically redo the last filter that I applied. So I can, by cutting it in half, when I make these selections and apply this redo of the filter, I can just gradually add it up to the point where I think that it's working. And we're just going to go around the image and do this fairly quickly. All right, and I'm happy with that. So technically we don't need this black and white layer anymore. So I can delete that once I'm done. Here I'm just trying to see if pushing these pixels will work. So I'm kind of like what I like to call mopping the floor in Photoshop to just kind of smooth out those tones a little bit more and make the floor look a little cleaner. And yeah, that's essentially that. Didn't need the black and white layer, so we're going to remove that. And now what I'm going to do is above my high working layer, I want to apply a dodge and burn group. There's plenty of ways that you can dodge and burn. The way that I like to do it, I like to use curves. So for my dodge layer, I'm just going to add a curve and set that to a screen blending mode. And I'm going to do the exact opposite for my burn. I'm just going to add a curve and then set that to a multiply blending mode. And once we do that and turn both of the layer masks black, it's going to take us back to the original image, where we can then paint over our image with a white paintbrush at a very low flow. I tend to always do this at a flow of 1, just so that I can really gradually control my dodging and burning. And then I'm going to just basically go in and dodge and burn. And basically what that means is you're going to be making areas lighter for dodging. You're going to be making them darker for burning. And essentially what you want to think of when you're doing like kind of what I like to call a global dodge and burn, areas that are lighter, you want to apply the dodge to, and areas that are darker, you want to apply the burn to. And this is if you're trying to contour. Now you can actually do the opposite to make your image blend better. So for instance, if you have like a blemish or something, a darker area on the face, you can dodge that area to get it back to a blended tone. And basically what I'm doing here is now I'm just doing this global burn and dodge, where I'm just going through the image and kind of reconstructing the light in a way. Just adding some shine to the shoes here. You saw earlier that I lightened up the pants a little bit. Now what I've done is I've created a merged copy of the layer, turned it black and white, and I'm going to a high pass filter on that layer. And basically what this is going to do is once I apply the layer mask, it's going to allow me to be able to selectively sharpen portions of the image. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sharpen over the eyebrows, over the eyes a little bit. And once again, I'm doing a fairly low flow here because I don't want to completely overdo the effect. But then we're going to like sharpen the cloth. Basically everything that we want to stand out a little bit more and have a little bit more focus. And now I'm just removing it from areas like holes so that it remains as realistic as possible. And now basically what I'm doing is I'm making a selection of the subject, and I'm just trying to refine this as best as I can to make it as perfect as possible, because eventually what we're going to be doing is we're going to be separating the subject from the background, which is what we're doing here, so that we can change our background separately. So right now the subject's selected. We're going to invert that selection just so that it's on the background. And here is where I'm going to go back into my high and low layers. And I'm just going to basically apply a blur to the high layer to blur out some of the texture. And I'm going to do the same thing with the low layer. It doesn't have to be an extreme amount of blur. You do want it to still look kind of realistic, so we're going to stay at a fairly low number there. And we're going to do the same thing for this low layer or the layer with the color and the texture. You can see if you push it really far, you're going to get that really crazy look. All right, and for the most part, I'm happy with that. So now what I'm doing is, to this high layer and the low layer, I'm applying another color mask, because in doing what we just did, you're going to create these weird halo spots around your image. So you want to go back in and mask those out with a brush that's set at a very soft hardness. I'm pretty sure I'm set to a 0 hardness for doing this. And basically you just want to go all around your edges to remove this halo that blurring the background has created. And here I see that I'm having some issues with some hardness around the image, and I realized that was from my selective sharpening layer. So I did have to go back and play with the mask in some of those areas too. So I think a takeaway from that is, if you find something weird within your image, just make sure that you're going through all of your layers, clicking them on and off to try to figure out where that issue is, and then you can take care of it from that layer. All right, now that that's done, I'm just going to basically select my subject again from a selection I've already created. And basically what I'm going to be doing here is select my subject, invert it, and then I'm going to darken down the background and the floor just a little bit, just to make it seem like the subject is popping more from the image. And now I'm going to select the subject, and basically I'm just going to select any layer below that has the subject filled in. We're going to go to color range, select the highlights, and then we're going to adjust the fuzziness until we get to a range that we like. And I think that looks good. So basically from here, I can add another curves layer, switch that to a screen mode, and we'll see that it brightens up those highlights a little bit. Now we're going to lower the opacity of that effect, and just so that it's not as strong. And we're just going to rename those layers to a back burn, front dodge. And that just gives a little bit more dimension. Now from an image that I created earlier, I'm just basically going to drag over the color grade that I did for that image and apply that on top of this image in the top layer stack. And then I'm just going to basically go through that color grade, which is a selective color, and basically just shift those ever so slightly to make them work for this image while still being mirrored to the previous image that I did. Yeah, the selective color is a very powerful tool in Photoshop, and it's one that I'm still learning as I learn more in color theory, but definitely growing to love it. And now we're just going to take a quick look at a before and after. Thank you so much if you made it to the end of this video. It's been a long, speedy edit, but leave a comment below. Let me know what you think. Once again, this is Shane with Shavy Photos, and take care.